Hey kiddies! My buddy Steven bet me that I couldn't come up with 4 different triple feature themes featuring the Killer Clowns from Outer Space movie. It's adorable, but completely wrong. 4 weeks, 1 month, October is Killer Clowns from Outer Space Month. Each week we will have a separate and distinct triple feature that utilizes one of the greatest movies of the 80s, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. This week we're starting it off with Christopher Titus genre movies. You remember Chris Titus? He's a stand-up comedian turned podcaster. He also still does stand-up comedy. He had a special that came out this year. Probably most famous for the Christopher Titus, or the Titus TV show, of which I was a very, very big fan. Actually, still am. I have all the DVDs. Based on the comedy special that put him on the map, Norman Rockwell's Bleeding, Christopher Titus specializes in really frank discussions of horrible behavior of human beings and how it affects everybody over time. Every so often he acts in movies. He has not been in a lot of movies, despite the critical acclaim that he had with the TV show. It really didn't turn into, a lot more TV work or a lot more movie work. That said, I'm always just tickled pink when he pops up in something, so we're going to look at 3 times when he's been in a genre picture, mainly horror and action. So our menu is going to include Scar 3D, Crash Dive, and, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Scar 3D is not bad. It's Angela Bettis, who I adore from May, mainly, and then every other time she's popped up in a horror movie that I've seen. She's just an incredible, incredible actress. She plays Joan Burrows, who, as a teenager, was tortured along with her friend by some sort of serial killer and survived. Come back to her hometown after 20 years to help out with her niece's graduation and or homecoming thing. And then, the minute she gets in town, scary things start happening and people start getting murdered. And we don't know, is it a copycat killer or has Joan gone completely insane? And the movie does a pretty good job keeping you guessing throughout the bulk of the movie. The only real problem with the movie is it's sort of long. It's not long lengthwise, it's just there's a lot of space where not a lot is happening, and it completely underutilizes Christopher Titus as Joan's brother Jeff. I gotta tell you, I remember looking up the trailer for it because it's an Angela Bettis horror movie. It's like, okay, let's take a look at this. And my jaw nearly dropped to the floor when I saw that not only is Chris Titus in this movie, not only is Chris Titus playing a serious character, but he's a sheriff's deputy in the movie. It's hilarious. He's just, completely unintentionally, because he's playing it straight and he does a good enough job. It's just, he sort of gets taken off the board relatively quickly because, if Joan has somebody on her side in the police force, there's just no way to maintain the tension of everybody being against her all the time. It was touted as being like the first horror movie in 3D in God knows how long, and it probably was. It did come out before My Bloody Valentine 3D, which I think was the first big one that I noticed bringing 3D back. But it's good. It's shot well, and it's October. So if you're like me and you need more and more horror movies because you've seen so many of them, this is not a bad one to check out. Next up, we have the slightly trickier to track down Crash Dive, starring the American Ninja himself, Michael Dudikoff. Michael Dudikoff is the designer of the submarine Ulysses, which is a super duper advanced submarine that, of course, wouldn't you know it, gets taken over by a crack team of European and or Russian terroristy bad guys. How did they get onto the sub? Well, it's through a series of silly and ridiculous actions. But they take over, and only Michael Dudikoff, the American ninja, who is not an American ninja in this movie, can take down the sub by, somehow also getting on board the sub. It's really funny when you have hostage situations on a submarine, because 1, it's sort of impossible to get to and from it, and 2, aren't they all officers in the Navy, shouldn't they be able to take down anybody that takes them over? I mean, it's not like Under Siege, which was on a battleship, and you can get on it and then you can get more people on it, and they at least showed that it was sort of like a nominal crew on the battleship. This one, it's like full-on nuclear submarine with actual nuclear missiles on board, and what the F? In this, this was made in 1997, and among the cast of nobodies is Christopher Titus, playing our sonar operator. And this movie is so direct-to-video and unknown that I couldn't find any pictures of him whatsoever. I was lucky to find the few pictures of Michael Dudikoff in the movie. So imagine this guy doing this job. It is forgettable, and it is fairly boring. What's weird is that Titus is sort of the comic relief character. He's in like 4 or 5 scenes, not throughout the whole movie. But in those 4 or 5 scenes, he's doing impressions. He does Bill Clinton, Clint Eastwood, and I believe one other. The funny thing for me is that he does no impersonations in comedy act. He will do characters like his father or his ex-wife and mother and other people, but he does not do celebrity impressions. And so they totally just went, "Oh, let's find a stand-up comedian. You can do impressions, right? Good, you're hired. Do it." And that was that. It was, yeah, it's on YouTube in its entirety. I mean, the production value isn't bad. Like, some of the sets really do look like a submarine set, and the models that they use for the submarine fighting is pretty good. But then you have other sets that just look like a room in a warehouse, and because it more than likely is a room in a warehouse. But, you always want to give Michael Dudikoff a little, credit, or, make the effort, because he is and always will be the American Ninja, and that is awesome. Finally, we have, you guessed it, Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Christopher Titus' first feature film role was Bob McCreed, who is in a total of 3 scenes in the movie. He's in the opening. He's one of the teenagers that is gone up to Lookout Point. So we see him getting a bruise for everybody, going up there and literally bumping into John Vernon, Officer Mooney, the jerk police officer. Both of them remarking that the other is an effing a-hole. We see him one more time when the comet that turns out to be the Killer Klowns spaceship comes down, or lands, and then we see what's left of him after he has been imprisoned in a cotton candy cocoon. We know he's in it because of the distinctive Bob McCreed, Sally Jesse Raphael glasses. I'm not going to talk too much about Killer Klowns from Outer Space right now, because as the month goes on, there will be better themes that are more suited to talking about how awesome it is. But it was funny because I'd seen the movie a zillion and one times. It came out around when I was 8 or 9, and it had heavy rotation on HBO. By the time I was 10, I had it completely memorized, because it's Killer Klowns from Outer Space. It's one of the greatest things ever. Years and years and years later, the Christopher Titus TV show happened, and that became one of our favorite things. And then when I went back and watched Killer Klowns, like the first time after seeing Titus, the TV show, I couldn't believe that was Christopher Titus way back in the 80s with a silly haircut and Sally Jesse Raphael glasses. But he does a podcast. The podcast is great. His stand-up specials are still wonderful. He had a new one come out this year that's called The Angry Pursuit of Happiness, so check that out. And I'll see you guys next week for something completely different that somehow still involves Killer Klowns from Outer Space.